Chit Chat. Today we're going to be talking about theming in games. Every game is themed to some degree, has some level of theming. It just depends on how much and how much the theming plays into the rest of the game. How much it contributes to the experience, how it plays, things like that. The sort of the feel you get from the game. So first things first, the theming. In general, we talked about this in a previous episode, but American games tend to be more heavily themed. European games tend to be a little more thinly themed, for various reasons we discussed then. And so, one thing to think about theming is how much of a role the theme plays in the actual game. So, today at the table we have games that we feel are kind of thinly themed, but good games. Games that are very heavily themed, they're very sort of theme dependent, give you a certain feel, but don't play as nicely. Games that have both great theming and play well, and games that have great theming but the components don't really play into this theming. So first, a couple of games that I really enjoy a lot but don't have much theming. These are both by Reiner Knizia. I have Poison and Loko. We talked about Poison earlier in another section today. It's a game where you're trying to have the smallest score possible. You play these potion cards into 3 different cauldrons, blue, red, and purple. And as soon as one cauldron hits 14, it sort of bubbles over, and you take all the cards in it. Now, Poison's a good game, but it's been reskinned at least once or twice, and that's because the theming doesn't really play much into the game. It's essentially just a numerical game at heart. You have these different numbers. You have ones that always count for a certain number and that are negative. You never want them in your pot. And but it's a little bit overproduced. In fact, as you can see here, we just have the rubber banded deck. I don't have the box with me. I have it at home because it's very bulky. The box comes with 3 thick cardboard cauldrons that you actually play the cards into. They're totally extraneous. You could easily play the game on a table with just 3 piles. You always know that you have a blue pile, red pile, purple pile. Really never comes up, and it doesn't really... I don't exactly feel like I'm mixing potions when I'm playing this. I feel like I'm just trying to sort of screw my opponent and outmaneuver them just with the cards.
And like we mentioned earlier, there's one that is like the same game but baking.
Right.
And they're the same game, but the theme just doesn't factor into how you play. You don't feel like you're a potion master. You feel like you're Patrick mixing numbers.
Right. It's very similar to a lot of card games with the traditional 52 card deck. There's no theming. It's just you can kind of slap any theme on because it's really a numerical game. It's a math game. It's a game about trying to determine what your opponent's going to play and screw him with it.
Right.
Loko's similar. Actually, a game I enjoy a little more tactical. In Loko, very easy to learn. You play a card and then you take a chip. There are 5 different colors, and each one has a corresponding chip color. There are 5 of each chip. The idea is that you're trying to get a collection of chips that are worth the most points at the end of the game. The points are determined by the last card played on that color. So the last purple card played is a 3, then at the end of the game, all the purple chips are worth 3 points. Very straightforward game, lot of strategy, a tremendous amount of strategy, actually. Oh, yeah. And this one we like a lot. But it's been re-implemented plenty of times. This started out as Flinka Plinka, then it was Quandary, now it's Loko, and recently it's been reskinned as something with animals. I don't know, Tom Vassell reviewed it. You can go there to check it out. But the theming is really... And this, they don't even pretend. Loko doesn't even have any pretense of theming. It's, as themed as Uno would be.
Right. It's very much in the vein of, like we said, like a kind of a standard playing card deck game. You don't... In a lot of ways, you don't really need a theme. In a game like that, a theme would be extraneous no matter how you...
Yeah, it would always feel tacked on.
Right. And I think that's a pretty good rule of thumb, too, is if you can switch themes and not lose anything or much of the game at all, the theme just isn't that well integrated and isn't that important to the game.
Well said, yeah. And these are both good games. I really enjoy them. They're great filler. And I think Loko even, I would escalate to the level of above filler. It's a really quality game. I think we would review it on the show for the fact that it's a little bit bland. There's not too much exciting to look at with Loko. Right. There's not a lot of sort of unique mechanics. But it's a very, very elegant game. I highly recommend it.
Absolutely. It's a fast game, it's a fun game, it's a tactical game, it's a thinking game.
Yeah, there's just a lot to think about in it. I find myself taking a long time on turns, longer than usual. These are great games, but very little theme.
Next we have games I think next we're going to talk about games that are like really good examples of everything. I'd like to talk about
ahead.
like very
Take it away.
like to talk about theming and gameplay in the positive. And we have like the games we have laid out here for those. We have Small World, which we've already talked about, and like as we mentioned in the episode we talked about Small World, it is a game where you control a series of empires or a series of dynasties of different races. You control and. Like the game begins with a bunch of lost tribes on the board, so it feels like the whole rise and fall has been going on long before you got to the board. It very much the gameplay very much reflects the idea behind the game, but beyond that, the gameplay is also a lot of fun. I've expressed my views towards Small World. I really enjoy Small World, and to get like just those. It's a really great combination of a theme that is interesting, that is like really well implemented into the game, that is sort of crucial to the gameplay. Like if it weren't like attacking and swinging races, then what would it be? And on top of that, it all fits together very well to make a really cool game, and I appreciate that tremendously. Mm-hmm. We have another game we have as an example of that is the Battlestar Galactica board game. And I think, Mike, you said this best earlier when we were talking about it, that despite the fact that we have never seen Battlestar Galactica, the show, we feel like through playing the game, we kind of understand the characters in the show to some extent. And I think that goes a long way toward saying how well-themed the game is. In Battlestar Galactica, you play a character that comes from the show. You have a character card that has your list of powers. Your powers are all like paired up with like a little snippet about the character, something the character has said, a character trait that the character portrays, and it all sort of fits together, and you really feel like one of the people in the ship.
Yeah, and despite there not being, say, a William Adama or a Saltai bio in here, I can still sort of get a sense of the kind of people they are. I mean, the kind of characters they represent in the show. Mm. And the nice part is I couldn't tell you who are actually Cylons in the show and who aren't. Some people actually spoil them for me at various points. But the nice thing is, because it's a game that's based around the trader mechanic and finding the Cylons and outing them, it doesn't. There's not one character in here that I would say, well, clearly he must be a Cylon at one point in the show. I mean, because the characters don't have like a trader feel; they just all have a sort of unique personality feel. And so, yeah, I think the theming definitely plays very well in a Battlestar.
Right, and not only
which is weird for a licensed game, I should say.
Oh yeah, because a lot of licensed games just feel like a standard game with something thrown on top of it. Like every instance of Monopoly comes to mind. Mm-hmm. I haven't played any of the Harry Potter board games, but it felt like it looked like Mousetrap.
Right, or like for example, I mentioned earlier, my favorite game, Star Wars Epic Duels. That game is passed over very frequently because it's a Star Wars game, and those are almost universally terrible.
Right. Although even then, in a lot of ways, I don't know if the theme of Star Wars is that crucial Epic Duels and much as the mechanics.
True. But I'm saying
right.
Right.
But yeah, I see what you mean.
As a themed game, it gets a sort of bad rep.
Right, because
it's a licensed game. Right. Yeah, not a themed game, of course.
Right, and that is an example of a game you can reskin very easily, because I know there's a very strong custom deck making community for Epic Duels, and you can apply to a lot of different scenarios. A friend of ours here makes Epic Duels decks based on anime characters. I've made a handful based on an HBO show that I enjoy. Mm-hmm. It's like much like a game like Poison in that respect. It would be a game that is a really elegant system, really fun system, but the theming isn't crucial.
Right, but we'll get to that in a later episode.
Right.
So the last type of game then, or a third type, I guess, is games that are very well themed that unfortunately don't play as well. They really capture the feel they're going for, but they're not very fun to play. They have mechanics that feel kind of broken, or they're not balanced well. They have various other really things that hold them back. Kung Fu Fighting is one example. Kung Fu Fighting is a game that sort of represents the sort of Hong Kong cinema feel, and it definitely gives you the sense of fighting in these ridiculously over-the-top situations where you're doing a flying, spinning, table-crashing kick. But at the same time, it doesn't necessarily play that well because the cards are not really balanced. There's a lot of randomness in it. Mm-hmm. You can, get a handful of attacks, but nothing to amplify them with. You can get a handful of amplification, but no attacks.
It's a very strange, almost like screw the loser mentality to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you tend to gang up on people to knock them out. The team variation is a lot better. The expansion helps it, but for the most part, I can't really recommend it for more than a simple filler, a fun filler game. Which it succeeds at. I mean, it definitely makes you feel like you're watching a kung fu movie. It gets you, people will start yelling across the table, like, your kung fu is weak, and, things like that. It is kind of fun for what it is, but not a great game. Unfortunately, I have to say the same thing with Last Night on Earth. Not a favorite of mine. It's gotten a lot of good buzz, but it doesn't really play that well. I mean, Last Night on Earth, very, very well themed. Just like Battlestar, I feel like I can get a sense for all the characters, even though they're not from a TV show. I feel like they're good archetypal characters, and there are good archetypal scenarios. You have it's a zombie survival game, so you have a lot of different scenarios that I can see in a horror movie, and even necessarily a B horror movie. It kind of has that feel to it. So really great theming, but nice components even. But it almost never feels balanced to me. Every time we play, it just feels too asymmetrical to be balanced. The zombies and the humans are doing two completely different things, and every scenario feels like it favors one or the other, no matter how many times we play it. We've had so many games end very anticlimactically. One team just steamrolls the other, because it's too easy to kill the zombies in one, or it's too hard to get the gasoline in another.
Right, and beyond that, a lot of the mechanics themselves are kind of complicated. I remember
Wonky,
the line of sight mechanic in this game is sort of. It takes a lot of learning, and even throughout the games that I played, there's still toward the end of those games, people are still checking the rule book to see if they can look at somebody.
Right. In my gaming club, this is one of the most frequently misunderstood and misplayed games because the rules are so convoluted, just not clean at all.
So I guess what the lesson to take away from this is that theming, the theming while a component of gameplay should not be almost elevated to I wouldn't put it above other components of game design. It's certainly important. It certainly adds a lot of fun to a game, but you can't. But good theming can't always save a game you're not going to want to play.
And it's hard to integrate theming at every level of play. I mean, you have games like Primordial Soup, the last game we're going to talk about today, where the theming is very evident in the gameplay and in the mechanics, but doesn't necessarily get held up with the components. So Primordial Soup, you're all amoebas, just sort of drifting through space, consuming things, reproducing, and I think the game mechanics very much capture that. You sort of do get the sense that you're just kind of at the whim of the winds for a lot of it, and that you are sort of evolving through the course of the game with the upgrade cards. And, really cool there. But it's all wooden cubes. It's all wooden.
Right. Your amoebas are just shapes with sticks in them.
Yeah, I mean, this is your amoeba. For instance, it's a square with numbers on it, or another side is a circle. Just very, very simplistic. All the food are just the classic wooden food cubes. So I mean, I don't know what else they would do really, because it's such a sort of abstract theme. So I don't know how to improve it. I don't think necessarily plastic amoebas would really be better. I think it's kind of probably classier to do it the way they did. But at the same time, you don't see these pieces on a board and say, "Oh, amoebas." They're clearly just drifting through a Primordial Soup. True. So I mean, I just think it's hard to integrate it at every level, I guess.
Yeah, and there's always going to be some level at which you cannot take the theme any further.
And I mean, I think like you said earlier, it can't be the driving force behind a game. At a certain point, you might have to drop a theme for one reason or another. You might say, well, I would love to get a character that has this feel, but that mechanic would be broken, or that doesn't translate well into what I'm doing. I'd love to have a character that can do this, can have this ability.
Right, but wouldn't be fun.
It would lead to a negative play experience, or, just wouldn't feel balanced. So yeah, I think that's about it for our talk about theming in games, and we will see you soon for the outro.